there, my name's Nate Jarrell, and we're going to be looking today at a 251 line in the key of E flat by the great jazz piano player Bud Powell. This is from a tune of his called Oblivion, that is on a record that I believe came out in 1956, called The Genius of Bud Powell. It features Ray Brown on bass and Buddy Rich on drums, and is a really great example of how to get some bebop style chromaticism into your lines, and also an interesting look at playing some altered things over the 5 chord. So let's jump right in and start looking at what's going on with this lick. Okay, so let's take a look at what he has going on the 2 chord. So we're playing over this F minor 7. Okay, first note of the melody right inside the chord. So he's playing the 3rd of the chord. Okay, putting that guide tone, that 3rd, right there on the strong downbeat of the chord, and telling us definitely playing F minor 7 there. Okay, but from there we start right off the bat to get some chromatic passing tones, things that are very common in bebop language. So we start on that 3rd and then go right to the 5th of the chord, but from there he's going to walk that up chromatically from the 5th to the 6th. So it's going to sound like this. Okay, now from that he goes right to the 9th of the chord, okay, the G, and we get this little triplet figure that's going to be the start of another chromatic passing tone line. So from there, he's going to start on the 9, but he's going to walk that all the way down chromatically till we get to the 7th of the chord, the minor 7th. So it's going to sound like this. Okay, so that whole line, okay, has some really rich bebop style chromaticism. That's something, if you're new to jazz and you're really trying to get your lines to sound a little more like jazz language, if you're playing over an F minor chord, even if you're playing very simple stuff, there's all kinds of stuff you can do there, as long as you have a strong target note in mind, that's going to be a good note over that chord that you can play using chromatic passing tones to get to it. Okay, let's jump over and take a look now at what he's doing over the 5 chord. So here on the 5 chord, we are going to have some interesting alterations going on. He's definitely going for the sharp 5, flat 9 type of sound. So at the beginning of the measure, he starts things out definitely just spelling out the chord. We start right on the 3rd of the chord to the root, and then to the 7th, okay, the flat 7 of the dominant chord. Okay, but then from there we end up on an F sharp. Okay, so F sharp over a B flat chord, that's going to be the sharp 5. So it's a raised 5th. It's going to be this sound. Okay, so the first part of that line sounds like this, all over this kind of a sound. Your dominant 7th chords are the place where you have the ability to build the most tension, and that's what's happening here. And those altered notes are going to give that to us. Okay, from there he goes back to the 7th. Okay, then we get a D flat. Okay, another altered note. Okay, the D flat is a sharp 9 over this. Okay, same thing as a C sharp, right? So if we're playing the D flat, that's going to be sharp 9. Then we go to the B, that's the flat 9. Okay, and then we land on an A. Now A is actually the major 7, but what he's doing here is not really playing that in relation to the chord we are on. That's giving us a half step motion with a little chromatic neighbor, getting us into the next measure. So that's moving us up to the B flat that's going to start out on the E flat major 7 chord. Okay, so that whole line with those alterations in it sounds like this. So it's going to be, okay, over the 5 chord. Okay, and we get those nice, we get sharp 5, sharp 9, and flat 9 there. Okay, you could obviously think of that as the altered dominant scale. I'm not sure that that's necessarily how Bud Powell would be thinking of that. He really might just be, he very clearly spells out the chord for us, but really might just be thinking of targeting those particular notes. If you're a guitar player, without even thinking about a full, we could play a sound like this. right? And that's the scale that's going to give us that. But we could also really just think about that in terms of our chord shape as well, or if you're a piano player. So, okay, that's all right inside that B flat, you know, dominant seventh chord shape with those alterations in it. So that's another way you can approach playing over that. Okay. And then when we get to the one chord, okay, he starts things out on the 5. Okay. He goes down to the 4, which is really just past that. The 4 is not necessarily the greatest note all the time over a major chord unless you're passing through it. But he's passing through that right down to the 3rd. Okay. So we start out on the 5th of the chord, passes through the 4, we end up on the 3rd of the chord, okay? And then we get these 2 triplets right in a row. So we get, okay, which has another chromatic passing tone in it, okay? So we're gonna get, I'll play that line again. We get 3rd, 5th, 7th, okay? And that's actually also, if we look at that, a G minor 7 arpeggio right there, okay? That's gonna give us the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th by playing that G minor 7 arpeggio over the E flat major 7 chord. Then from there, he's going to walk down chromatically again. So we get from the 9th, we walk down to the E natural, and then that's going to drop us onto the root of the chord. Okay. So that E natural by itself wouldn't be a good note against this. Okay. But because we're passing through that, we get that nice chromaticism happening there. Then he's on the 7th of the chord. And then the B is kind of an interesting note choice, okay? A B over an E flat major chord is actually going to be the sharp 5, okay? So that's an interesting note choice there. But he goes straight from that to the 3rd of the chord to end off the line. So that whole line together is going to sound like this. Okay, and then we end up on the 3rd of the chord. Now, in the next measure in his solo, this carries on. So I just paused us right there on the downbeat of that 4th measure. There's actually an A9 chord that happens in the second half of the measure, in this next measure. And so he goes on to another idea that kind of carries us into that. But we're going to pause right there because this is a really great 2-5-1 line. And you could definitely take this, modify it slightly, turn it into your own line. That's the goal with all of these videos. So as you're watching this, hopefully you take those concepts we just talked about, find ways to apply those to your own solos, and then come up with your own line so you're creating your own ideas out of these. So one more time, here's that lick in context so you can hear what it sounds like. Give that album a listen. Give this tune a listen. It's some really great stuff. Bud Powell was way ahead of his time. One of the really important piano players that helped develop what we now think of both as modern jazz piano playing, but also his chromatic approach and how he played was really a very modern sound. Even for now, these lines can be applied all over the place in more modern settings. So check Bud Powell out, and here's that lick one more time.